Good morning, everyone. Hope you can hear me.
Good morning.
Just admitting people into the, oh, I can't believe I'm getting a phone call. Just admitting everyone into the room. So wait a few minutes to make sure everyone's here and then we'll get started. One thing you can do, folks, while you're waiting for everyone to enter, is if you can just sign in, just say hello or something like that in the chat so that we know that you're all here. Great, thank you. People are writing good morning. Hello. Morning, everyone. Okay.
Ready to go, Paul?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Tuesday, September 22nd. Dare I say it, the first day of fall. And good to see all your faces. We certainly are hoping to actually have some time with you today. It's really our first longer class than 10 minutes. So we're really happy to have you all there. And there's a lot to bring together today. We have last week's session with Jordy Walker, the week before Sherwin Solowin. You just had an Indigenous walk with Jamie Morse, courtesy of Robert Ballantyne and Linda. You've read Daniel, you've read Chambers, you're starting to dip into Sensoy and D'Angelo about social justice and teaching. There's a lot out there. And so here's a start. We don't want anyone to feel overwhelmed, please, just one step in front of the other. And today we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're hoping to finish around 10 past 11. And then if people want to stick around to ask Paul and me questions or tell us things, whatever, that's great. And you know that we are always accessible by email and very welcome to any questions that you might have. Paul? Okay, Paul's somewhat frozen, which is also a reflection of the
lag.
Are you okay? Okay, Paul, do you want to take it away?
Yep. Okay, so you want to go into the Padlet? Yeah, okay. So, okay, this morning we are going to start experimenting with different communication tools. What we're doing in the blog that I hope you guys are able to access. As each week we are trying to introduce a new communication tool to you. So I think in our first blog post we talked about Padlet, so we're going to try using it and experimenting with it this morning. I'm actually going to give you a link for a Padlet, and we're going to use this as a way to just reflect on some of the stuff that Heather mentioned earlier, some of the things that have been going on in the course. It's interesting that like a lot has been thrown at you already, but with Jordy Walker and the Indigenous Walk, Sensoy, D'Angelo, Chambers, Daniel, but we really haven't had an opportunity yet to about any of this stuff. So that's what we're going to try and do this morning with Zoom. Not with Zoom, well, we're doing with Zoom, but also we're doing it Padlet. And let's see if I can share my screen and see how that looks like. Maybe yes, maybe no, who knows. Oh, it's not what I wanted. Oh, there we go. Okay, so this is the Padlet that I'm going to show to you guys. I just got to minimize myself here. Um, and this is, you can see it's like basically a blank screen right now. I'm going to give you, I think I put it in the PowerPoint. So I'll get to the PowerPoint to get the link so that you guys can see how to get into the Padlet. So I'm opening this up right here. Okay, so I'm going to copy this link here, and I'm going to put this in the chat so you can click on the Padlet. And the whole idea of the Padlet, and again, some of you are probably used to using this, is just basically to use the Padlet to respond to some of the things that have gone on in the course so far. So stop sharing my screen. Go back and I'll put it in the chat and see if that works. So you should be able to click on the Padlet link right here.
Okay.
You should be able to click on the Padlet link here, and then we're going to stop for a few minutes, so you give you an opportunity to click on the Padlet and just to react to some of the stuff that you have been experiencing in the course so far.
So Paul, people just open up with that little pink circle in the bottom right-hand corner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And we'll give you about 5 to 10 minutes just to go through what your impressions and understandings and questions have been with regard to the Indigenous walk, what you read in Chambers about belonging, where people belong, what you read in Daniel with regard to urban and suburban schools, what you heard from Jordy Walker, what you've been thinking about for the last 3 weeks of being in school.
And if you're having any trouble getting on the Padlet, just write us a note in the chat. But I'm seeing that people are writing already, which is great. So there's different types of Padlets. The one that we're using now is a kind of a stream. So you won't see comments going all over the place. They'll kind of be entered as a stream. And then you can scroll to see what people are writing. Yeah, so a lot of people are writing right now, which is great. If you've never used Padlet before, if you're having difficulty posting, you'll see at the lower right-hand corner, you have to click there, and then that'll allow you to add stuff. And if you're on the Padlet, well, you look like you're on now, you can also react to what people are writing. You'll see there's a little heart below what people are writing, and if you click on it, it's like you can like people's comments. case anyone missed it, I'm just putting the link out. We'll put it to Tyler twice. Sorry. Put it out again to, what is that? The cool thing about the Padlet is you can keep on writing on it, and then we can share it out with you later on as well. Padlet's a really cool tool to use also as an exit card for a class. We used it last year. We had a guest speaker who came in and spoke to the class, and she ended up with an exit card, and then sent that out to us. It was an open link, so it sent it out to us afterwards, which was great. So you about her presentation. So that was pretty cool. So yeah, so there's also things you can do, all sorts of things, all sorts of ways you can use Padlet. And thanks very much for your comments. I've been reading through them. They're really, really interesting. Heather, do you want to comment on anything that you saw in the Padlet?
Of course. Can you hear me right now? Can I just get a thumbs up? Or okay. First of all, I want to thank everyone for trying it out, and also just the sensitivity and the sensitivity of your comments. It's quite obvious that we've got a lot of people in this HHH cohort who are very open to thinking about new things and are kind of embracing this new culture of, yes, online learning, but also learning how to become a teacher. And Paul, I love that we can actually take those Padlet conversations, however brief, and send them back to the people in the cohort. I think that would be incredibly, incredibly useful. Padlet, if I could just talk about Padlet as a tool, number one, it's free. I used it as a teacher. I know Paul used it quite a bit as well. It's almost, probably you did this in your own schooling, when a teacher calls you up and just asks you to write some impressions, phrases, words on Post-it notes, and then run up and put it on the anchor chart. Padlet allows people to respond in a very considerate way or in a really quick way. And you as a teacher, as an educator, can also organize the responses, not just one response, right, Paul? But you can have the responses in different columns, so the kids, the students can compare their answers.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you very, very much for that. Is there anyone that, we've been doing the talking, and we certainly don't want it to be that way. Is there anything that anyone wants to contribute or say at this point?
I just had a question about Padlet.
Yes.
Our names show up as anonymous unless we sign up. Is that the case?
Yes, and excuse us, we should have given you that direction before. It would seem, Paul and I were playing around with this on the weekend, it would seem that you only show up as anonymous unless you put your name down. If someone wants to look more into that, that would be great. Like a lot of apps, Padlet is free, but then there are different levels of Padlet that you can get that, of course, involve a subscription. But as one of the first tech tools that we've introduced to you, it really is a great little tool. It's also a great organizing tool. For example, if you're doing class organization, think of 35 Post-it notes. You could move them around and create your own bulletin board. Thanks for your question. Thanks for clarifying that.
No problem.
Any other questions or comments about what you heard or saw on the Indigenous Walk, connections to what you've been reading with Chambers and Daniel, what you heard from Geordie Walker last week? Please feel free.
If you'd like, I can read my Padlet response out. It's just about as thought out as I'd be able to make it in the moment.
Great.
So my response was a response to the Chambers article. And I wrote that my family has done the 23andMe type genetic testing, and I have no Indigenous genetic markers whatsoever. My family is also not culturally tied to any Indigenous groups. On my mother's side, we can trace the family tree back to the Coureurs des Bois and Filles du Roi. So on that side, I'm literally descended from settlers.
Mm-hmm.
And And on my father's side, I'm descended from Mensheviks, who were Jewish communists in Russia, who fled Russia as political refugees, and other Jews from across Eastern Europe who fled the Holocaust. So pretty much the opposite of my mother's side, not settlers, but refugees. Uh, Either way, I've never felt like I had any national identity aside from Canadian. I don't identify as French because going back many generations on my mom's side, they were French settlers, and I don't identify as Eastern European because of my great grandparents' Russian and Romanian nationalities. Um, I really only identify nationally as Canadian. Uh, but the question of Canadian identity, uh, citizenship, and subjecthood under the Queen, I found it really interesting because I'd never really asked myself that question. Uh, I'm a subject of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II because her ancestors colonized this land. I'm a citizen because my mom's great grandparents had colonized this land, and the descendants of colonists accepted my dad's grandparents as refugees. So at no point during that process were Indigenous voices involved. And I found it interesting reading an Indigenous voice's perspective on national identity, citizenship, and subjecthood.
Matthew, thank you. First of all, thank you for stepping forward and doing that. Really well written, a lot of information there. And Matthew, when you were in elementary school or high school, did you learn a lot about Indigenous? And by the way, everybody, I call it our story instead of his story, but did you learn a lot of Indigenous history?
Not a lot. Uh, all that I learned was very surface level, learning about the different nations across Canada. So learning about some of the Pacific nations, some of the Algonquin nations and Iroquois. Um, but really it was learning. Some of them were pseudo-nomadic, some of them were not. Some of them hunted buffalo, some of them did not. And that was about it. And then I finished my schooling in Calgary, and that didn't talk about, at least grades 10, 11, 12 social studies didn't talk about anything Indigenous aside from residential schools. Otherwise, it was more world history.
Okay. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to make a connection to what Matthew was saying or contribute their own thoughts or perspectives?
Yeah, I have something to talk about. From the Indigenous walk, I think the thing that stuck out to me most was really like the placement of some of the monuments, and the one with the boulder, I forget the name of it. It was like Anush Bay, or I forget the name of the Indigenous people they were talking about, but it was a boulder, and I completely forget what the boulder represents. But the fact that it was placed right beside the huge, like probably like 6 times taller Canada 150 statue that had shiny metal, was made of nice cement, and it was very symmetrical, versus a little boulder with a plaque on it. And like, it just, that wasn't the only thing from the walk, but just like the harsh realities of almost government not caring enough. Yeah.
If you were, thank you very much, Michael, if you were teaching that, maybe what you would do is you would show the really large structure, a monument, and then show the smaller boulder and just have the students take a look and come to their own conclusions, because structures represent significance, right? Thank you very much for sharing that.
No problem.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Personally, for me, I thought what was really interesting on the walk, and I actually commented on the discussion board, was the plaque that was thanking the sacrifice of the First Nations people that supposedly fought during the War of 1812. However, reality were the guide was saying that it's unknown if, or it's believed that no chiefs of First Nations people actually fought in the war, and how it's just revisionist history. And I thought, as someone who's going to be a history teacher, that that's a really interesting and concept that I should be aware of and be careful of when teaching students in the future, and how even the best of intentions can have negative consequences because it's not actually telling the truth. And yeah.
It's a really, really good point. Paul, do you want to pick up on that, having taught one of the history courses last year?
Yeah, I think we all have to, like, especially when you're teaching history, and history is so much about context and what is historical truth now as compared to even 10 years ago. And we looked at a lot of that last year, and I don't know if you guys, like, if you've started a history course yet. I guess you would have if if that's one of your teachables. But history and what we focus on changes a lot over time. So what we emphasized like 15 years ago is not the same kind of stuff that we emphasize now. And one example that I found really interesting is when did we start focusing on things like the Battle of Vimy Ridge? Like in the 1950s, it was not something that was talked about at all when it came to Canadian history. It was not part of the context. So there are societal reasons and political reasons almost why we started shifting our focus to focus on that particular battle. And it's something that we covered. And if I was teaching the course again this year, we would have covered even more, because I think it's really important to see how our focus shifts over time. So Heather, you can talk more about this, but when you started teaching history, there wasn't very much of a connection to teaching about Indigenous issues or an Indigenous perspective on things, whereas now there's much more of a focus on that.
Most definitely. So I started teaching actually the week of September 11th. So the focus was very much on other things in 2001, 9/11. One of the things I did as a teacher, and we talk about intent, and we really appreciate the mention, it might have been Michael, about if you teach with intention, well, your intent or your background information might be wrong, or it might be excluding a lot of different perspectives, especially when you are teaching something like our story. And so when the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report came out, and before that, even when the Reconciliation Commission was hosting these really very dramatic, eye-opening meetings where survivors of residential schools were first telling their story, as a teacher, I was a bit ashamed, but you have to get over shame because shame just locks you. And I made an effort to really learn a lot about residential schools, and completely changed how I taught our story, because I had never been taught anything except for, a schematic map of where the Algonquin lived, as Matthew had mentioned. So any time in life and in your teaching life, you can change direction. And it's really important to always be absorbing that information so that you're giving as much information as you can.
Okay, I'm just wondering if we should move on, because we have a lot of other stuff that we need to get to today. One thing I'm going to add right in the chat, just an article on Padlet, and I did a quick check a few minutes ago about looking for articles on Padlet. And the reason I put this one here, this is a website, and the person who has written the article is Richard Byrne. And one thing that's really important for you folks to work on, you'll be working on this your whole careers, are looking for credible sites to get good information about teaching. And it's something that we can do on a regular basis, is share people who are bloggers and writers who do a really good job of sharing ideas about education. And it's something that I think we will always talk about. Richard Byrne is very, very good when it comes to tech tips and things like that. So that's why I chose this particular article. there's something else, and we haven't shared this with you. We'll have to do this at some point. We are collecting articles that we can share with you, and we're doing it through a kind of a web collection service called Digo. And I'll put that this article on Digo as well. And as we find other articles that might be useful for you, we will put it there, and then we'll share the link to the Digo group so you can join that group, and then you can share all the articles that we're collecting. And if we put an article up there, it's because someone like Richard Byrne is a credible source who puts out really good material on a regular basis. People that as you learn more about education, you're going to start following certain people, either bloggers or people on Twitter. That's a credible and an important way to learn more about your profession, because the great thing about being in education, you're learning all the time. So that's why that article there is hopefully useful for you. It's really quite a short article. It's only like a paragraph, but what he puts in the article, which is really cool, is it turns out one of his most popular YouTube videos, and he does a lot of how-to videos, is the one on how to use Padlet and all the different ways you can use Padlet. So hopefully that'll be useful for you, and I leave it there for your use.
Thanks, Paul. And again, as an ongoing student, right, we all curate our own information. So like the best kind of teacher is somebody who just loves to learn. So any ideas you have for us in terms of technology, things that you've used in the past, please bring it to our attention. Any other comments before we move on to a short treatment of what's been going on in the readings and getting your input? AKA slideshow, right, Paul?
I'll get the slideshow up.
That would be
Yes,
great.
I will.
Does anybody have any comments? And I'm going to apologize right now. My chat text is not obvious at all. So if anyone has any comments, and you feel free to give them right now as Paul's launching the slideshow, please go ahead.
And there's the article, by the way.
Great, so you've posted that?
Yeah, it's posted, and I've shared also the link to the PowerPoint as well. And there's a lot of folks who are on it already, which is terrific.
Terrific. Okay.
So I'm passing it over to you, just making sure that it's loading.
Yeah, I'm just going to put mine up, Paul, because again, my chat box is not working.
What are you putting up? Okay, I'll look at the chat box and you talk. How's that?
That would be great. Okay, thanks very much. So again, just a little intro, because theory has to meet practice as you're learning how to become a teacher. So this is a Google slideshow. Definitely when I was with the OCDSB, Google was our platform. And I learned pretty quickly that using slides is a great way not only to present information to students, and you don't always want to be using slideshows to present information by any means. It's a really great way to organize yourself as a teacher. So if you're, for example, you're planning a grade 11 geography lesson, you can actually put all your material on a slideshow. You can embed videos, you can embed audio, and you can keep speaker notes at the bottom that are just for you. It's a wonderful way to revise your curriculum, so you're not, as I did so many years, starting all over again and reinventing. Okay, so let's go to slide 2. Okay,
Learning intentions.
Pardon?
Learning intentions.
Learning intentions. So again, this is practice for you, and you will know this already, having curriculum design and with Linda Radford as your professor. It's always important, especially with backward design, to know exactly what you want to teach. And I will tell you, many of the teachers that I had growing up didn't necessarily know or didn't necessarily follow what they wanted to teach in class. So we have listed three points as more a modeling or an example for you about thinking through what your intention is when you're communicating with people and what their learning goals might be. Okay.
Success criteria, that's me. Okay, so the other part of this, and again, I don't know if Linda started doing this with you, but this is definitely what she'll be doing. And when you're coming up with your planning and doing stuff, your planning documents with Linda, that you'll always have learning intentions and success criteria. So today it's pretty straightforward, and you can see them right there. I'm not going to read them off.
That's
Okay.
the other thing about reading off slides. You've probably all been in a class or a lecture or even at a public event where the person puts up slides and then reads right through them. So slides are supposed to be some kind of a prompt. They're a prompt. They can have a lot of images, but you don't want to read completely from slides. It can get pretty brutal for your audience. And Paul, we want everybody to practice with Padlet this week, right?
Yeah. How do you want them to practice with Padlet?
Just play with it.
Yeah.
Just play with it and keep that one in your back pocket because it's easy to use and students really love it.
Okay. And so there's again the link to the Padlet.
Yeah.
You have a copy now of this slideshow, but you all found the Padlet pretty well. Good. I like how you guys are using the chat too, because you're asking each other questions like, how do I post to it? And that got answered. So thanks very much for helping out with those kind of things there. So again, we'll share this with you. Make sure we'll send a link out to you so you have a record of the Padlet. You'll have a record of all the stuff that people were talking about this morning, which is terrific. So and it's like unfortunately when I was teaching, I don't know if Padlet existed. So, but it's a good tool. It's really, really interesting. And teaching last year, again, it was really great. So back to you.
Okay, you had Post-it notes though, didn't you, Paul?
Yes, we had Post-it notes, like little pieces of paper with sticky stuff on it. Yes.
People's backs when you want to. Okay,
Yeah.
So this one slide is just something for you to reflect on, especially in the reading of Chambers. And we're going to give you a couple of minutes to give us your responses to Chambers. But there are the key questions like, well, who are you and where do you belong? Do you know where you belong? You might not have your DNA tagging, but do you know where you think you belong? Can that change? Do you understand how we've all been affected by colonialization and the whole idea of what colonizing is? And I'll leave it there because that Chambers article, it was very different from Daniel. She really, the author really brought in her own experience. And as I understand, she is the partner of George Erasmus, who was the first lead of the Assembly of First Nations. So would anyone like to speak to the Chambers article? Or chat to it, and then Paul can read it.
Yeah, I have something that came to mind as I was reading it. Basically, one of the things that I thought about when we were saying like, where do we belong or what is our identity as Canadians, is that we often like borrow or take Indigenous symbolism to represent Canadians, like canoes, Inukshuks, Huskies. These are all something that belong to Indigenous groups. But if you go outside of Canada, and even as a Canadian living, along the border, like most of us do, who are very Americanized in some senses, we still, put those patches on our bags of like Canadian symbols that are often Indigenous symbols. So I guess something that my question is, or if I have a question, it would be how do you, use, like looking at Vancouver 2010 Olympics, they used Inukshuks as their symbols for a lot of the sports. And, is that offensive? Is that incorporating? Like, where is the line of stealing to, and versus accepting and incorporating and honoring, I guess, when you're using those kind of symbols?
Great question. Does anyone want to take Andre up on her question? Andrea, would you see the use of the Inukshuk in the Olympics, the Vancouver Olympics, like cultural misappropriation, like taking something that you don't necessarily have the whole context, understand the whole context of?
I do personally. I mean, I can't say that I'm super well read about it, the topic, but because it was such an international stage and we as Canadians were identifying ourselves with Inukshuk, I think that was cultural appropriation.
Paul, do we have any comments? Thank you, Andre. Any comments on the chat or on that?
No, not on that topic. No, there's some other stuff going back to Padlet, and I'm asking Michael if you could share that. So I'm just your skill strings.
Okay, well then, Andre, just to follow up what you were saying, two things. You know, in 2010, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was going on as we hosted an international event. And many people from Inuit communities were put into residential schools. Secondly, and you know, my comment, like, don't get frozen by shame or blame. There's so much now you can do as new teachers to learn about different Indigenous cultures and incorporate literature, art, our story perspectives into your teaching. And so all is not lost. We just have to start now.
Can I comment on or answer the question?
Please do.
Want to go first?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Okay. I think that's a great point, and I think again too, like as Canadians, like we have to really look at how we use Indigenous imagery. Like one example that I would talk about. So like as a child, I would go to the cottage and we would see Inukshuks along the highway or on boulders, and you know sometimes my parents, like again when I was like 8 to like 11 and my sister was 3 to 6, like we would stop and we would make Inukshuks, right? And then I was driving through the same area like a month ago and I was thinking like, you know, with everything going on, like, was that appropriate or was that not appropriate? And I think, you know, in my opinion, again, too, like as like a non-Indigenous person, I didn't find it inappropriate because of like the kind of reasoning behind it, maybe to like participate or just like to create, but someone could find it, you know, completely appropriate for like a non-Indigenous person to do that. So I think, you know, definitely for the Canadian Olympics, like using the Inukshuk, especially when like the Truth and Reconciliation Committee is going on, especially when there's so many injustices, I think that's inappropriate. I don't know where my like childhood action would have stand. I was also like 8 to 11, so I didn't really understand the concept of you know, cultural appropriation. But again, too, I think it's also like reflects on if like the intention my parents might have had, like they probably knew about it, but they might not have thought that it was inappropriate because so many people do it. I don't know.
Just to go off on that, so I don't think if it's inappropriate if it was like a learning opportunity, personally. Like if maybe your parents had taught you like what it meant, that they might not even know like the real, what it actually means to build an Inukshuk and what they actually can look like. It's been very like anglicized of what it looks like and has to look like a person. It doesn't always look like that. Also, I just have some books that I got throughout my university career from some Indigenous teachers that I just wanted to share. It's this one is 21 Things You Didn't Know About the Indian Act. And I think it's a really good read if you don't know much about it, because it's really like an easy read just to kind of get your feet wet a bit. And then also if you want to add some Indigenous teachings into your classroom, this one is called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's by Robin Kimmer, and she's very knowledgeable, and it's a bit of a bigger read, a bit of a harder read, but it's very knowledgeable about how to put some of this teachings into your classroom, which I think they're both really good. I'll put them in the chat.
Great.
I think Where I Stand by Jody Wilson-Raybould is also an excellent read. It's not really a novel. It's a collection of her speeches in like as her time in the government and as regional chief and all that. And it's very enlightening, and I think definitely something that everyone should read, especially in this cohort. Like I think all people in politics should read it. especially with what happened over her tenure there and her removal, but definitely.
Ryan, could you post that in the chat, the Jody Wilson Rainbow? Paul, I'm thinking that maybe what we could do with our blog is that we make sure that maybe we have a book section or a reading section. People can contribute to it as the weeks go by.
Yeah, they can contribute by putting in a comment in the blog.
Yeah.
And I think with the DIGO, once I share it with the group, and I'll share that with the group today, you can, if you're a member of the group, you can also upload articles to the DIGO.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Ryan. Do we have any other comments before we move on to some slides about the Sensoy and D'Angelo readings? Is everyone really equal? Is there anything that people want to contribute? Do we have any chat comments that we need to take a look at, Paul?
No, I think we're good.
Okay, may I move on then?
Yeah, I'm just getting back to the slideshow. I moved it off there for a second. Okay.
Okay, so you've got Sensoy and D'Angelo, Is Everyone Really Equal, is an academic / practical instructive series of chapters on how to introduce social justice thinking and conceptualization into your own professional life as a teacher. And we hope that everybody is keeping up with that reading. At this point, you should have read the first 2 chapters. I think it's pretty good writing. We'd love to hear your opinion of what it is, but 2 professors provided, who are in the other cohort, provided some slides, some questions, for some things for us to think about. So the first chapter is more of an introduction. And basically what it does is it kind of shakes your world to make you understand as a critical thinker how you should always be a critical thinker, which is going back to our talk about our story, how everybody needs to understand that understanding is based on perspective and what you have been told first before you challenge what you understand. And definitely mainstream perspectives dominate curriculum, politics, you name it. To be aware of that is extremely important. And Sensoy and D'Angelo definitely press that button. Again, I'm not going to read out what the goal of social justice education is, but definitely, especially now when you have relatively little commute time, and I'm being facetious, but there is more time to read and to find out who's out there. Find some bloggers, social justice education bloggers that you would like to follow. There's some really good people out there who are doing some really good writing, and they will inform you as individuals and as developing teachers. Can we go to the next slide, Paul?
This one?
Okay. Sorry, just because my Zoom is funny. Are we on how to engage, what makes teaching social justice so challenging? Is that the slide?
No, it's.
Sorry about that.
We are now.
We are now, thank you. You've all addressed it, and Sensoy and D'Angelo talk about it. Topics are, like political topics are sensitive. We all have families. We know sensitivity. And the whole issue of Indigenous rights and what actually has happened in our story in Canada, and what we don't know, it's all there and it's pretty raw, especially for the people who have been directly affected. And it's not just Indigenous peoples. So it's challenging because to teach honestly and with integrity means you have to bring up difficult subjects. Would you agree, Paul?
Definitely. And it's interesting about when we talk, I'm glad that we started with this book, because it's really important for us to kind of wrap our heads around social justice and education. But I think it's important, and Linda mentioned it right at the very beginning. Like, she called today the 3rd introductory session. And I think one thing that she talks about and I really believe this, and I know Heather does too, just even the act of working in an urban school has a lot to do with social justice. And here I'm going outside of Sensoy to talk more about the practicalities. And this gets back a little bit more to Geordie Walker. It's that being in an urban school and working in an urbanized area, working with racialized students, working with in hard to serve neighborhoods, that in and of itself is an act of social justice. And I think what you're going to find, and you'll see this especially when you get out to your schools, or when you get out to your schools, and especially if you're working in the urban area, it'd be kind of cool for you to talk to teachers and see why they teach in these areas, and did they choose to actually be in these areas. And there are some schools in Ottawa that are really challenging to work at, and I sincerely believe that teachers who work in these schools, it in and of itself is an act that is trying to promote social justice. And my understanding of social justice started by working and traveling in Latin America and talking to a lot of educators there, then realizing that some of the things that educators are doing in Latin America are happening right here in Ottawa, using education as a way to make social transformation. Because when it comes down to it, the greatest tool that exists to really change the lives of human beings is education. And if you're working in a school in a high poverty area, you are actually every day doing that. You're doing the social justice stuff. And Heather, maybe you could talk for a minute a little bit about that, because you worked at VM, at Vincent Massey, where there were a lot of racialized students, or are a lot of racialized students, and there's a lot of poverty in that area. Do you ever see your own teaching as an act of social justice?
Yeah, yes, of course. But you have to be careful, right, Paul? Not thinking that you're the savior going in there. If you are you ready to be humbled rather than to be congratulated as a human being? That's the best way to do it. And by the way, when you teach grade 7 and 8, you are humbled all of the time. I wanted to teach in a school where I would encounter a lot of people whose backgrounds I knew nothing of. And I'll tell you right now, we are living in such a raw time. You already know that, but it's such a time to learn from. Talk about inequity. If you don't have great Wi-Fi at home, if you don't have more than one laptop or Chromebook, or you use your mom's phone, how are you going to learn online? And things are very uncertain right now in terms of what's going to be happening with the school board. So be very aware, please. You strike me as a group that actually is really, really aware, and you kind of walk the walk and look around. Take a look at what kind of social justice there is now in Ottawa with respect to the divide between the kids whose families have and the kids whose families don't have financial resources. Just pay attention because the inequities will become very, very obvious. They definitely were obvious last spring when we were all within a day or two online teaching. I'll leave it at that, Paul.
Any reactions from any of you guys? Okay. I go back to your slideshow, Heather, because
Yeah, I think it's slide 9 now, Paul. It's chapter 1 continued. I think we'll just leave it there. I think it's with these slides, you're reading Sensoy and D'Angelo, unless you have something that you want to bring up now. These slides are really well prepared to just bring you back to the major points or major ideas made, in this case in chapter 1, and then going on to chapter 2. Would you agree, Paul?
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm distracted because I'm reading the chat while you're talking here.
Go ahead. Go ahead. Is something on the chat that we should?
No more technical stuff. Just making sure that the link to Sensoy and D'Angelo was reposted. So
Okay.
thanks very much for that. So it's there for everyone.
All right. we will be sending this slideshow out to you. It's a good summary of what went on. And those of you who haven't tried Google Slides, take a look. It's intuitive and easy to use. I know because I found it easy, and that means that it's really, really easy. Okay, shall we move on, Paul? Because we've got lots of practical things to talk about.
Okay, so let me unshare. I want to share something else with you guys. Go back to this and then see if I can, give me a sec. Okay. So we've shared the link to the slideshow. I did it earlier, so it's in the chat.
Great.
So we wanted to spend a little bit of time, because we've had so little time with you guys, seeing if there's anything that we need to clarify with you. So one of the things we want to do is just go over the blog with you so you can see the stuff that's there and get a sense of what we're trying to do with the blog. So that first picture there is a picture I took when we were in El Salvador in the little village of San Jose de las Flores in northern El Salvador. And I really do think a lot of my ideas about social justice were formulated by my time in so. There's a lot of content in the blog, so I hope you have a chance to take a look. I'm just down one thing, and I want Heather to talk a little bit about this. We said that every week we're trying to give you another tech tip. So last week's tech tip was Padlet, and again we're kind of giving up more information as we go. One really great thing to do is that we have time to answer your emails or texts at any point. So if at any time you guys have questions or you can't find things, please let us know, because we know how challenging it is in this kind of an online environment, especially with Brightspace. So if anything is confusing or you can't find things, please let us know, and we'll find an answer for you pretty quickly. But Heather, I wanted you to talk about Google Classroom, because the tech tip that you put in this week is about Google Classroom. And just explain why you put that there and where you want to go with that for these guys. Okay.
So again, as we understand, the University of Ottawa has got, the teacher candidates will be able to use Google Classroom. Before, when I was an associate, it was really difficult. I could not actually get my student teacher onto my Google Classroom as an editor, as a co-teacher. Google doesn't like competing Gmail addresses. So number one, what we would like you to do, please, this week, after you've played with Padlet, is take a look at Google Classroom. Again, it's free. Phone, laptop, tablet, whatever you have. But when you open up your own classroom, do not use your U Ottawa email address, because you should be getting access to Google Classroom when you get with your associate, and you do not want to mess things up. So please, if you do not have a Gmail address, get a Gmail address, also free, and practice with Google Classroom. I think in terms of a learning management system, Google Classroom is really, really good. It is widely used. Definitely, it was widely used during what we call the COVID spring, when we were all thrown into our houses and had to teach online and learn online. I'll tell you, teachers learned, I hope, a lot, including me, about what you should do online and what you shouldn't, and how to use Google Classroom effectively. So Google Classroom is, it's a presentation model, it's a communication model, it organizes, and it also allows you to grade and keep comments on assignments, which is really, really helpful. It helps a lot if you're on the whole Google platform, but we do not know what's going to be happening with who's going to be teaching online, and we would like you to be ready so that you feel confident using Google Classroom. And that's our dog. Does anybody have any questions about Google Classroom? Or has anyone used it?
If you've used it, could you just do a thumbs up? We want to get a sense of if that's something you guys are familiar with. I'm just scrolling through all the faces. Oh yeah, there's some.
Good.
Not that many though, actually. This is interesting. I would have thought there'd be more people who've used Google Classroom.
Again, guys, like I'll make my testimonial. If I can do it, you can do it. Right, Paul?
Yeah, and I think this will be useful going forward because Heather is in this unique position of actually having taught grade 7 during the pandemic for 3 months. So there's not a lot of people that, like most of the people who did that teaching are back in the classes now or doing stuff, but Heather retired right after that. So we have the benefit of her experience there because it's a very different way of teaching. So the more that we hear from, this is my bias, but the more that we hear from Heather on that, I think the better.
Well, I think what I'll do too, Paul, is, you know, ear to the ground. I'm talking to a lot of my colleagues who are teaching online now, who are in the virtual school. And Paul and I will be collecting comments from people at the intermediate and senior levels about what's working well with onlines. And then we can impart that to you guys if you would like.
Yeah, because I think what's going to happen, the way things are going, when you guys get out teaching in November, I think a lot of it's going to be online. If you're in the public board, it'll be Google Classroom. And just to make things more interesting for you, if you're in the Catholic board, you'll probably be using Hapera, which is another online tool, very good, but a little more complicated to use. So as we get closer to your practicum dates, we may have to spend some time on Hapera, at least as a subgroup for people who are going to be doing their practice teaching in the Catholic board.
Excellent point, Paul. So we'll introduce Hapara as well.
Okay, can I just go scroll down? What we're putting in every week is also technical tips on Brightspace. So this is getting down to, we just got a few minutes left, like 14 minutes left. So this is like housekeeping stuff. I made another video and I'm using a really cool tool called Camtasia or something like that. And it's a very good screen sharing tool to make webinars and like this. So these are like, you're the only folks who are seeing these things, but I made a little webinar on Brightspace just based on comments that people have been sending to me either in our section or other sections too. This one is on notifications and checklists. If you on Outlook are getting tons and tons of emails every time the content changes somewhere in one of the education courses, you can fix that and you can make your life less complicated. So in this short video, I show you guys how to do that, how to set your notifications, just so you don't get so much stuff coming through Outlook. For me, it's already been a problem this year. I missed the meeting because it looked like all the other notification emails. So you can take a look at that. The other thing that we've done is we've cleaned up how we do checklists. Thank you, Camtasia. Thanks very much. We've cleaned up how we do checklists, so it's very straightforward now. What we are trying to do is when you have tasks, and the tasks come from Linda, we categorize them in a checklist, and every time you get something done, like you've done some today already because you watched the Indigenous Walk, you click on the box there and then it'll show that you've got a percentage of your task for this week completed. So that's explained in this video as well. And so I update those videos every week. So on the side, there's a video of the week kind of thing, and it shows up there too. So it's there twice for you guys. Heather, anything you want to say about the blog?
No, well, I have an announcement. My announcement is we have a winner, Paul. I don't think you know about this. We got our first flat lay submission. Yay, Andre. Thank you. Andre, what kind of chocolate do you like?
Oh, I emailed you. I was like, oh, mailing chocolate seems weird, so it's not necessary. But I do like Snickers bars.
You like Snickers? Okay. Andre, are you in Ottawa?
Yeah, I'm in Orleans.
Okay, well, you know what? There might be a package on your doorstep. Just saying. We'll be in touch. But more importantly, if there's anything more important than chocolate, Andre, thank you. Andre submitted her own flat lay, and we still, because there's more than one chocolate bar, we still are encouraging you, please, to think about making a flat lay. It's a great way to get people to tell about themselves without talking. And it might be something that you would like to use as your students, or it could be something like find 10 objects that represent this novel for you, grade 9 student. A lot easier than writing, and pictures tell a lot of stories. So still putting that out there. And if anybody has any comments, we're really hoping that you're reading on the blog. Please do. It's kind of our summary of what's going on, and with some bad images in it and silly jokes, but please. And if anyone wanted to take on the blog and help us out with it, we would love that as well. And lastly, a blog is a great way to communicate with students and parents.
Yeah, and you're going to find later in this semester, one of the major assignments that you guys work on for this course is called the Digital Hub. And the Digital and I think it's pretty basic, but you have to do a post, one post each semester, which is not really hard to do. One thing that we would suggest when you are coming up with your digital hub is to use the same tool that we're using. And I don't know if you can see the address at the top, but it's EduBlogs. It's very, very straightforward. It's an easy tool to learn, and it does one thing and does it really well. It just blogs. What I found last year with students, they were using websites and all sorts of tools that are way too complex when it comes to blogging. You don't need to have a full website, and not even very useful, especially when you become a teacher. What teachers use EduBlogs is designed for teachers, but it gets the message out very clearly to your parents if that's what you're designing it for. And it's a great thing to have.
It's also a great thing to teach intermediate senior students, because blogging is a different kind of writing. It's a very, very good tool for teaching people how to write and express their views. Okay, so we're coming into the home stretch. We know that 11:30 you've got, is it 3 hours of curriculum design? So next week, please check the syllabus. Please check Brightspace. You do have a PLC, Professional Learning Community, next week, having to do with the Teachers Federation. Speaking of which, as well, Linda Radford is they're looking for 2 IS reps to sit on the U of O council. So if you're interested in doing that, please do. We hope you all got the email that indicated, and you heard Linda, that the University of Ottawa has decided that most classes will continue to be online in the winter term. I think we'll just leave it open to questions, Paul. We just have a few minutes, or if people want to get going, have a stretch and get something to eat or drink, go ahead. But if people want to stick around and talk to us, we're here, right, Paul?
Yeah, especially if people have any questions about their PLC coming up next week, Brightspace, Outlook, the blog, any other kind of questions that you have, please start asking us right now. Yes, the PLCs are asynchronous. I can't say that.
Asynchronous.
Yes, they're not live. How about that? And we made the link visible for this morning. It's on the left-hand column going down. If you can't find it, let me know, and I'll do another webinar on that. Cool. When do we get confirmation if our placements are going to be in person or online? As some of us will have to relocate. Whoa. That's a really good question. I don't think we have the answer to that. And to be honest, I don't think, Abby, that anyone knows the answer to that question. As the COVID cases start going up, November is like, it's really hard to tell. That kind of information won't be coming first from us. It'll probably be coming from the practicum office or directly from Tracy, and then she would write all of you at the same time. So I don't think anyone knows that at this point. Okay, Heather would like to be one of our reps. Congratulations, Heather. You don't have to do anything. We will pass your name on to Linda. Does the PLC start at 8:30? And do we meet together again at 10 next week? So we're not meeting at all next week. Heather, what is the time for them starting the PLC?
Well, it was at 10 o'clock. I'm scared to touch my syllabus because I think I'll lose all of you because my Zoom's acting really weird, but I'm going for it. I believe it's 10. I will confirm that if there's another question for you to take a look at, Paul.
Yeah, there is. Okay, so what's the idea behind the PLC? Avery's asking that question. It's a great question. PLCs happen they're the alternate weeks from sessions with us. And there are two types of PLCs. There are ones that are put on by Tracy Crow, and the one next week is put on by Tracy. And then we also are allowed to put on some PLCs as well. So basically, the last week we had Jerry Walker was kind of like our own PLC. But there are a variety of these that are presented by Tracy. What's really important, and again, I find that there's so much stuff buried in Brightspace that we may actually, Heather, if you could make a note of this, there's a Word document, it's a blank chart, and you're all gonna need to record the PLCs that you take part in on that particular chart. And so I do have that in Brightspace, but I'll probably have to put it out again, and it's just a Word document, so I'm happy to do that. That's important because it's another one of the assignments that you pass in at the end of the year, as you know, just like the digital hubs, and you have to do those. So basically what you do is every time you attend a PLC, like next week I think is one of the mandatory ones, you just write in, okay, I attended it. I attended the Federation PLC. So it's just a word chart.
Okay, so it's basically putting down summary notes, Paul?
Yeah, oh, and Emily thank you, Emily, has just posted it on our chat. Sweet, thank you. So I'm glad that we're that organized. Okay, so so it's there. So download that, put it on your desktop somewhere, and every time you do a PLC, just write in that you attended that particular one.
So are we like going to be notified when there are different PLCs or like, and yeah. Okay, sorry, maybe I'm just like completely spacing out, but I have no idea what's going on. So maybe
don't worry about that.
There's a lot going on. It's on the syllabus, Emily, it's on the syllabus. Use the syllabus as your kind of long-term planning tool because Brightspace, the modules get posted every week. But definitely there are three, as Paul said, there are 3 mandatory PLCs, and one of them is next week on September 29th, and it's called Federation Day. And I've got the timing here, 8:30 to 11:30.
Okay, so this PLC is just something that we watch, like take note of, record that we were there, and then we're marked on how well we make notes, or like I just want to know, like I would hate to get to the end of the term and be like, oh, you're missing 30% of your mark because you didn't write something down.
Well, we would tell you that.
Okay, because that's my vibe right now.
Yeah, so don't worry about that. And also you're not really getting a mark because this is a pass-fail course. So we just have to see that you've done the work. So at the end of the year, like we say, okay, yes, you know, Emily has her PLC chart done. She's done her 2 blog posts. So there's like 5 different things that you would accomplish, and that is totally separate from your practicum. We don't mark or grade your practicum and all. That's the job of your associate teacher. So for us, it's like 5 different assignments that you're working on. One of them being that PLC chart that was put in the chat a little while ago. That makes sense?
Yes.
So definitely please use your course. Thanks for asking the question, Emily. Please use your course syllabus for your long range planning. For next week, as I look at the syllabus, you need to please post to the learning log your reaction response to the Indigenous Walk and any connections you can make with regard to your reading of Chambers, okay? And by the way, your responses are just terrific. Thank you so much. We have committed to reading all of them, your intros and your responses by the end of this week. And if you haven't gotten your responses into Daniel or Chambers, let's do it. Get it done. For the PLC next week, you need to read some materials. A model for Ontario schools, something about the Ontario what is that? What's OCT? Oh, College of Teachers. Good gosh. Do not tell Linda Radford I asked what OCT was. And you have a video to watch, okay? So again, Paul, those resources are on Brightspace, I understand?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I might have to, I'll work on a checklist again for next week, and we'll put that in the blog just to reiterate what you need to do. We do the checklist to help you find stuff, and a lot of times I'll put links in the checklist to other material in Brightspace so it's easier for you to find. Abby had a comment, and I agree with what Abby's saying, trying to keep up with 3,000 things. I think it's a lot for you guys to keep up with. One suggestion I have, and we've talked in and out about that, is that maybe you guys should think about coming up with your own private group, either Discord or Facebook or something like that. We decided not to do that because we weren't really sure if that's something you guys wanted us to be part of, and that's great, but it might help you guys because one of the best resources you have normally would be yourselves. In a normal situation, after class, you would be still asking, okay, where is that? Where do I find these things? And obviously you can't do that. So it might be a good idea for you to come up with your own private network. Maybe you already have it, but it's a good idea. PLC, Heather, what's that stand for?
Professional Learning Community, Paul.
Yes, that's one of the questions as well. And the PLC next week will be a video. It's asynchronous.
Oh my God.
Asynchronous. It's asynchronous.
It's not live.
Not live. It's not a Zoom. I can say Zoom. I just can't say
the
other thing. Okay.
Okay. And Paul and I are going to put some resources out there in addition to what some of your colleagues put in the chat line, resources that you might be interested in just furthering your own understanding of Indigenous our story. I just saw yesterday that CBC is taking the Richard Wagamese book and then movie called Indian Horse, which is an incredible piece. And it's on CBC Gem now as a movie to watch. So, make some popcorn, although it's kind of hard to watch. Eat the popcorn during the good times. But we will put some things out there for you to read and indicate which things we think you really, really should have going into the education system to understand better what our Indigenous story is, okay? And, there's a lot of chocolate out there. And if you don't like chocolate, we can do something else. So get your flat lays done. It'll be fun.
Okay, and we have our second, I think I didn't miss anything. I think we have our second volunteer. Where'd she go? We have a second volunteer to Rosetta. Thank you very much. So we have Heather and Rosetta. I hope I didn't miss anyone.
So Paul, I have an idea about that. Heather and Rosetta and anyone else interested, just email Linda and Sherry. I would send an email to Linda Radford and Sherry orders.
We have to do that, Heather.
Oh, we have to do that. Okay, forget that.
Yeah. And Andre has a neat idea. Is anyone interested in using UCC group in Discord to ask questions outside of class, or we could use a Facebook group? I often have questions as well. Yeah, so yeah, go ahead and do that. And then if you can't answer the questions, then ask us, because we've been answering questions from other cohort members, not even our own class. And so we're happy to do that. And Heather was the one who wrote the syllabus, and I'm the one who did most of the design work on Brightspace. So it just so happens that we know a lot of this because we had to do the writing of it. So we're happy to answer any of your questions either in the chat, but I know you guys have to go. Email us, send us a note on Teams, whatever works best for you guys. Or you can have a delegate who will ask questions for the entire group, and we'll get back to all of you. Yeah.
Hey, everybody. Good. Okay. Go have a stretch, something to eat, something to drink. All the best for the rest of today. Take very, very good care of yourselves. You know you'll be hearing from us.
And we'll stay on for a few minutes in case anyone has a question, Heather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Otherwise, have a great day, guys.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
See ya.
Paul, Rob Christie, just wanted to follow up. I had sent a note wondering about getting contact information for Frank Lechen. And I'm just wondering if I should pursue another avenue for that information, or if you made any progress.
Heather?
So, Rob, I reached out to Frank, if I can call him Frank, if I could be frank, through Facebook and didn't get anything back. So I'm trying to think of some people that I know that might have his phone number.
Oh, okay. I thought he was even potentially still active as an OT.
He was. He was. But I was just going to write to you, give me another day.
Sure.
I might have a former colleague who has Frank's phone number, so I can call Frank and then set that up, okay?
Okay, I'm not creepy, but I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
When I was his student, he was very close with the science teacher at the time, whose last name I don't think I ever knew her first name. I always just knew her as Miss Malva. That was it. This is the I'm not creepy part. She lived like 3 blocks from my parents' house. Okay, well, we moved 2 blocks from my parents' house, so I know which house is hers, and I've seen her standing outside of it. I could certainly ask her as well, but
she'd love to say hi to you, Rob. She's
all right,
such
well,
a character.
Maybe I'll just wait until sometime when I can walk past with my kids. I find that they're a pretty good introduction to pretty much every conversation. As a large bearded man, it's sometimes awkward. Like looking for a babysitter, for example. I'm not the right guy.
But I will try one more colleague and see if I can get a hold of Monsieur Lachaine.
Monsieur Lachaine, that's it. Man, please don't tell him I said anything other than Monsieur Lachaine. I'll be in trouble still.
I would not put you in that position. I got it.